Hey, tada, friends and family all over the world. Thank you very much for making the time to join us on this special episode of the Simply Label podcast. Can I tell you, I look forward to today's episode for a number of reasons. But before we do that, I just want to point it out there. If it's the first time that you're joining us, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Please invite your friends, your family, and they must invite their friends and their families. Why? Because at the Simply Label podcast, we live to impact lives for the better, one person at a time. Friends, family, today is a special episode that I want to do. Whatever time of the day you're listening to, please lock the doors. If you're in the car, don't let anyone in. Park on the side of the road. If you're in traffic, even better. Don't focus on the frustration of the traffic. Just give me a couple of minutes and I can tell you, you are going to enjoy this particular podcast today. So, I live in, and I must say it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege that I appreciate and I'm grateful for every day. I live in a beautiful city, the mother city, Cape Town in South Africa. If you haven't had a chance to make a trip down here, oh man, this one is for the bucket list. But anyway, why I'm telling you this is that I take the time to take in my surroundings as regularly as I can. So I go for walks every now and then, regularly, at least 2 to 3 times in a week, roughly about 5 to 10 kilometers. And this is not just for fitness purposes, but also it's my time to think and reflect and take stock of who I am becoming, what do I want to be, what do I want to do, how well am I doing in this, that, or the other, but also an opportunity really for me to reconnect with my Creator. Now, as I was taking a walk today, this morning in particular, I was inspired to deviate a little bit from the leadership segment, which has been receiving phenomenal feedback, by the way. I must say, I appreciate every one of you that has tuned in. Some people have been sending me DMs on the side. Others took the time to comment on Spotify. And just, I'm telling you, I'm learning and I'm receiving the love. And it's just challenging me to dig deeper and deeper. But today, I was inspired to deviate a little bit. And I began thinking about something that I would like to title for today as today's title, since it's this episode's title. And I simply titled it, The Audacity to Dream. Yes, the audacity to dream. A story has been told of a young man who was roughly 17 years old, who belonged to a family of a father who had 2 wives and 12 sons. He was the 11th of these sons. Now this young man, as the story goes, his father loved him very much. And often he was one of those chaps, who would kind of tell on his brothers, growing up, some of you would relate if you've got siblings. There's always that one among us, if we are busy with, things that are naughty or things that we know we shouldn't be doing as kids. There's always that one who's going to be the first one to snitch on the rest of us, eh? He was that guy. And the story goes, his father loved him. And it was so evident that he loved him that his father made him a tunic or a coat of many colors. And I can only imagine being one of these brothers that this was a thorn in the brother's flesh. And they hated him. Because of it, they hated him. They couldn't even speak anything, I think the story goes they couldn't speak peaceably of him. In other words, they had nothing great to say about him. But the story continues that this young man at age 17 had a dream. And his father, being a farmer and a livestock owner, this dream was kind of relatable, both to him and his brothers. And he had the audacity to tell his brothers his dream. Hey, gents, listen, I had a dream. Please come, listen to me. I had a dream, and in my dream, we were out in the field binding up sheaf. And sheaf is, in simple terms, I'm not a farmer, but I read up a little bit on it, is, a bundle of, shafts or sheaves of wheat that are put together at harvest time. That combined, they make up what we call a sheaf. So he then says, we were binding up these sheaves, clearly it was harvest time. And in this dream, guys, I saw my sheaf standing upright and all of your sheaves was bowing down to mine. Oh my God, he shouldn't have said that. And the story goes that his brothers hated him all the more for even mentioning and saying, hey, you're dreaming this way. In fact, they said, who on earth do you think you are? You think you're going to rule over us? It's bad enough your father, I could imagine they probably would have said things like, it's bad enough that it's quite clear that our father loves you more than he loves the rest of us. But now you think you're going to be, who the hell do you think you are? You would have thought this is where the story ends. No, he had another dream. And lo and behold, one would have thought, hey man, the young man has learned from his previous experience. No, in this, he gathers up the brothers and says, hey, come here, gents, please, man, come, give me a hearing. I had another dream. And in this dream, 11 stars, the sun and the moon were bowing down to me. Oh goodness. And the story goes that his brothers hated him all the more. Now there came a time where his brothers were out in the field, and his father was quite worried about them. They had taken seemingly longer than what they normally do to come back from looking after their father's flock. And he happened to be the guy that his father sent through to go and look for the brothers. Hey man, go check on those guys. Where are they? And the young man sets on a journey looking for his brothers, and along the way realizes, oh man, they are not where they are not used. They normally are, and they've gone a little bit further out. And he meets somebody, a stranger, says, have you seen my brothers? And this person directs him in the right sort of direction, and eventually he gets closer and closer to them, and they recognize him. Whether it's because of his walk, I would dare say it's probably because of his tunic, his coat of many colors. They saw him from a distance, and some of them started whispering to each other, and they said, here comes this dreamer. Here comes this dreamer. And hey, right there in that moment, a thought entered into their hearts to say, we're gonna get him good today. In fact, we're gonna kill him. So he approaches innocently as he comes, eventually gets there, they beat him up, they bind him up, and at some point, his eldest brother comes up and says, hey, gents, you cannot kill the young man. I cannot have him, his blood in my hands. And they decide, you know what, let's throw him in this deep, dark pit. They threw him in there, and as they were, still kind of enjoying the moment, enjoying the fact that, hey, we've got him. And in fact, the story goes, after they threw him in there, they just carried on and enjoyed a meal. Let me pause and tell you at this point that sometimes you will meet people in your lives, especially if you're a dreamer, especially if you are somebody who, although is living in circumstances that are severe, circumstances that are contrary to your dream. The moment you start pursuing your dream, the moment you start even telling people that this is what you're dreaming and it's bigger than where you are, sometimes your enemies will have lunch after they've insulted you. They will have lunch after they threw you under the bus. But hey, let me not get ahead of myself. So you know what happened? And some of you may be familiar with the story. Is that at some point, one of them said, okay, look, now that the big brother said we can't kill him, let's make some money off of this guy. And along came some traders from a foreign land who were traders. In those days, slave trading was normal. Human beings were sold to other human beings who were well off, for a sum of money, and they become literally a property of the person that has bought them. And, so they sold him into slavery, and along goes this 17-year-old who left home. Little did he know that this was going to be the last time he was to see his father in a long while. Innocently going to look for his father, obeying his father's, he was looking for his brother. His brother's obeying his father's instruction, and ends up being beaten up and thrown into the ditch and sold into slavery. And these chaps went back home, stripped him off his, having stripped him off of his tunic, killed an animal, dipped it in blood, and went on and lied to his father to say, hey, your son has been swallowed up or chewed up by wild animals and he's no more. And of course the father weeps. The father mourns literally for the loss of his son. And off goes the young man and goes to another foreign land. When they arrive, these traders that had him, they sell him further into one of the influential people of that land. And this happens to be a man who was working directly for the king, very influential figure, very well off, and he examines the young man and finds him worthy to be his slave. And so the young man gets sold to this influential man and starts working for him as a slave. You need to remember, when you were a slave, you were a property, so you don't get a salary. You get to eat whatever it is you're given. You are a personal property. You don't get to sleep until your master tells you you can sleep. But lo and behold, there was something special about this young man, because everything he touched prospered. Everything he did, there was a special gifting upon his life, in that while he was under the slavery of this man who has bought him, everything that he touched, that he did, seemed to multiply, seemed to excel, and seems to be better and better. And so the man, his master recognized this and actually eventually put him in charge of everything he owned, to the extent where his master had paid no attention at all to everything that this young man touched. In fact, everything, his entire estate, he left it in the hands of the young man. But lo and behold, while the young man was at the top of his game, as top as he can get as a slave, the wife of the master started desiring him, suddenly started feeling that, hey man, this handsome boy, man, there's something about him, and started inviting him to her bedroom. And of course the young man was refusing, and or at least kept resisting. I'm sure it must have been tempting to an extent, because the story records that she was a fine woman. The wife of his master was a fine woman. And at this point, I want to pause and say, many of you listening to this, especially as gentlemen, you're going to have temptations. The more you pursue your dream, and the more glimpses of your destiny are revealed to you, and you start doing well, and you start excelling, you start making a little bit of money, you are going to have temptations. That's your test of character. And when the woman realized, hey, this young man is not giving in, at some point it got so much that she said, I'm going to lock him pretty much in the house. And the only way for the young man to get away from this is to run for his life. And unfortunately, she held on to his coat. And as he ran off, and that's what you should do, guys. Because when you get into this temptation, run for your life, because this is a matter of destiny. And so she held on to his coat and literally lied on him, waited for his master, her husband, to come home and said, hey, this chap wanted to rape me, and here's evidence of that. He left his coat here with me. Oh my God. And of course, I don't know about you, but I would probably have reacted similarly. to what the master did. Came back and he said, "You will not violate me like that. I'm going to throw you in prison." Threw him in prison, having been falsely accused. And here he was in another pit. At this point, he was a young man, probably in his 20s, and in jail. And it looked like the dream that he had was never going to happen. But there was something in him that just never stopped dreaming, never stopped hoping, and never stopped working towards his dream. So much so that the jailer, or the warden, as we call it in modern day South African language, saw something special in this young man, and lo and behold, elevated this man to the extent where he put him in charge of the prison. Can you imagine a prisoner being in charge of the prison? Unheard of, eh? Even in today's world, it would go berserk in today's world. This young man became a prisoner in chief, a prisoner in command. And along came a time where two highly influential, highly placed, highly ranked people that were very close to the king of that time and the king of that nation threw these two chaps into the same prison. It so happened to be the same prison where this young man was kept. And lo and behold, they had a dream, each of them separately. And because the young man was placed in charge of this prison, took notice of them, and at one point came to them and said, "You look perturbed. You look disturbed. Is there something that I can help you with?" And they go ahead and tell him their dreams, because they felt, no one else could interpret them. And hey, lo and behold, the young man says, "Listen, I can interpret them for you. This is what your dream means, and this is what your dream means." And hey, lo and behold, the dreams of these chaps happened exactly the way this young man interpreted. One of the chaps was actually killed by the king. That was the interpretation, or executed 3 days later. And the other one, 3 days later, was restored to his position as he was actually the king's wine dresser. And something interesting happened after he had interpreted his dreams. If I take you back to, or their dreams, if I take you back to the scene where he was interpreting. And having done so, he said to them, "When you get to the king, particularly the wine dresser, please mention me. I am in here, quite frankly, undeservedly. I'm in here for things that I did not do. I'm in a foreign land. I was taken away from my people. And I continue to wallow in a pit. And my sin was," and I can imagine in his head that's what he was thinking, "my only sin was that I had a dream." And so, when the wine dresser was restored to his position, he carried on with life. He forgot about the young man. Lo and behold, can you believe it? He forgot about the young man. And the young man kept on dreaming. Kept on dreaming. 2 years went by. No word from the king, no word from the man. But lo and behold, in the fullness of time, the king himself had 2 dreams. And no one could interpret these dreams for him. And hey, it is in that moment where suddenly the wine dresser remembered that, "Hey, king, I've made a mistake. I So the wine dresser suddenly remembered, "There is a young man, king, there's a young man whom I've completely, or I had completely forgotten about. Back in prison, when you threw me in there along with my other colleague, we had dreams, and this young man interpreted these dreams, and exactly what he interpreted happened to me and to my colleague. The way that he interpreted it, he was quite accurate. And of course, the king quickly gave the order to say, quickly, bring that young man to me now. Now the moment of destiny had come for the young man. They sent word to get him swiftly. They prepared him, they washed him, they got him ready to face the king. They dressed him in the right apparel. And as he comes up to the king says to him, yeah, I hear you've got a gift. I hear you are able to interpret dreams and the like. And the response of the young man is quite peculiar. The young man says, no, it is God who gives the ability to interpret, Your Majesty. How can I be of service? And the king begins to tell him his dreams. And, for the interest of time, I will not get into, what the king said. But in essence, the young man then begins to interpret the dreams for the king. And man, at some point when he had finished interpreting the dreams, he then says, so king, if I were you, and I'm paraphrasing him, right? If I were you, king, I would do the following in preparation for the eventuality which your dream has revealed. And then he begins to give a plan. He begins to give whether it was an inspired moment, and I believe it was, in that particular moment, he then says, king, you need to do the following for the next 7 years. You need to have a plan, build up storehouses, make sure that you've got enough, because the 7 years that will follow will be 7 years of famine, 7 years of hunger, 7 years of depression, 7 years where you're going to wish, king, that you had done what you needed to do in the first 7 years. And so the king marvels that this young man looks around and says, is there anyone, this is the king now, is there anyone in the whole land who is wiser than this young man? And of course, no one dared say to, yeah, king, because if they were, they would have been able to interpret the dreams to begin with. And right there, the king looks at him. And in what looks like a dream, which in essence actually is the moment of destiny and truth for the young man, the king says, from this moment, I place you in charge of the entire land, the entire country that I lead. Everyone will bow down to you, and no one will lift a finger or a foot except for your say-so. You will be second in charge, and I will be only, over you from an authority perspective as it relates to the throne. But as it relates to the rulership, the governance, and everything that has to do with the running of the land, the running of the entire country, I, with immediate effect, place it in your hands. So, friends, family, why did I take this much time to tell you this powerful story? I ask you, do you have a dream? Does your dream look like it's impossible? Does your dream look like your current and present circumstances? Chances are it doesn't. But if you have a dream, if I go back to question number 1, that's a good thing. But I want to tell you, your circumstances are going to challenge your dreams. The people around you are going to challenge your dreams. In fact, the moment you start speaking about your dream, I want to tell you, expect opposition. Expect opposition, and more times than not, it will come from the people you love. But whatever you do, have the audacity to keep dreaming. You might feel like you're in a pit right now. You might feel like you're in a prison right now. You may have gone through life experiences that seem to negate and speak against your dream, that have led you to believe that your dream is never going to happen. But I want to ask you, dream one more time. Dream one more time. Have the audacity to chase after that dream, because you know what that dream is? It is actually your Creator, the Almighty, whispering to you, showing you your promised land. If your dream looked like your circumstances, then what good is that dream? Your dream is only valid and strong if it promises a better tomorrow. I grew up in a small township called Potchefstroom, and I've told this story in one of the previous episodes. And when I was much younger, before my dad could afford to buy a house, we lived in a 2-roomed shack. It was only 2-roomed because there was a curtain cutting through the center of the shack, and there were 8 of us living in there. My bedroom was in the kitchen, together with my dad and my uncle. The bed and the table were adjacent to one another in the kitchen. But I had to have the audacity to dream, and I thank God for my father who invested in my education. I thank God for him having enough tenacity and enough sense to be a father who is present, a father who invests in their child's future. And that gave me the springboard to dream. And today, where I started and where I conceived that dream, where I started compared to where I am now are 2 different things. I don't want to talk about what I have and where I am. That's not the point of this. But the point is, I had to have the audacity to dream. The young man had to have the audacity to dream. His own brothers beat him up with the intent to kill him, threw him in the pit. What they did not know was that he was a seed. And a seed, my friend, has to be thrown and be buried in the ground for it to be productive. They threw him in the pit, sold him into slavery. And he was in another pit because he was a slave. And in there, even as he began, it looked like things were going well. It looked like he was flourishing even as a slave. And boom, before you know it, thrown into another pit. Let me end it here with the following few words. Very few would applaud the seed, but many would flock to enjoy the fruits of a tree which has endured the storms, the rains, the heat, and the cold. It takes a farmer or a producer to recognize and appreciate a seed, but a consumer to recognize and appreciate the fruits or the harvest. What is the moral of the story? As you pursue your dream, do not expect an applause from the people around you. For a seed to produce a harvest, it must be buried in the ground first, so that in due time it shall break ground, spring forth, and produce fruits. And then those around you in the tribe that God has placed in your path will begin to see what you, the farmer, has always known all along. So, when they ridicule and laugh at your idea, when they only view your status or your post and never cheer you on, when they haul insults and tell you how ridiculous you are, how impossible your dream is, take heart, my friend, take heart. A seed must endure the rain, the storm, the heat, and the cold. These are the necessary ingredients to fortify the seed that is you. Come what may, in due time, in Kairos, due time. Kairos means the appointed time for things to come to fruition. In due time, if you hold on long enough, if you keep watering that seed, if you keep honing your craft, if you keep believing and keep working, keep believing and keep working at it, you will break ground. You will spring forth. You will produce the orchard that has always been in you. Do not abandon your dream just because the consumers around you do not think, like, or see what you see, the producer. Your dream is only as strong as your willingness to protect it at all costs. Sometimes, even from those whom you love. My brother, my sister, have the audacity to dream again. This is Simply Lebo. I'm signing out. Tada.